Good morning, Scotland. Good morning, social media land. I hope you're well. It is Monday, the 28th of April, 2025. An interesting post came across my YouTube comments the other day. It was discussing why we have never received another Section 30 order, even though we have requested several. The reason the commentator stated was that the SNP had never held a majority on each of the occasions that we requested one. I found this very interesting as it discussed something I'd never thought of before. So I asked myself, why had we not received a further Section 30 order? Was it truly because the SNP had never had a majority, or was there other reasons? So I deep dived this topic and learned quite a few interesting things. Now please understand that today's video is not me having a go at my fellow freedom fighters. In fact, it is quite the opposite. I like it when such comments are made as it gives me an opportunity to go and look into a topic and learn something new. And to be fair, I also need to be open to correction too, if what I say and what I feel is not accurate. So let's get into this. Okay, so here's the comment from YouTube. We currently have an independence majority in Holyrood. Westminster still ignores it. The British state has unequivocally stated that only an SNP majority is good enough. Thank you, Glasgow Kiss, for this. I appreciate the chance to have a good look at such an important issue. If we're campaigning for SNP 1 and any other Indie 2, and the UK government are adamant that it can only be an SNP majority that will demonstrate the will of the Scottish people to allow a Section 30, then we best be sure we are doing the right thing. So first, let's understand what a Section 30 is. I'm going to be using a bunch of images today while we examine the topic. Each of them will have a QR code that you can pause the video at and screen capture to go to the site that I pulled the image from. Or you can go to the links for each of these images and each of these articles in the description of this video. They will all be in order as I use them. I do think that it's important that it's easy to access this information just for clarity as we go through today's topics. Right, here's the first image. A Section 30 order is a type of subordinate or secondary legislation which is made under the Scotland Act 1998. It can be used to increase or restrict temporarily or permanently the Scottish Parliament's legislative authority. It does this by altering the list of reserved powers set out in Schedule 5 and/or the protections against modification set out on Schedule 4 of that Act. I have no idea what that means, but I'm going to take a guess here. A Section 30 order is special permission from the UK government that gives the Scottish Parliament extra powers it normally doesn't have. It is used when Scotland wants to make decisions on things that are usually controlled by Westminster. Without it, Scotland's hands are tied on certain big issues. I feel just having the need for special permission is an insult and a disgrace, but my feelings for this will be discussed in further videos, specifically on this topic. Having looked through the definition of what a Section 30 is, I could not find anything that stated the party of government in Scotland had to have a majority of MSPs for Westminster to grant a Section 30. So the SNP have applied for Section 30s on 5 separate occasions. One was granted in 2012 when Alex Salmond applied for one to hold the independence referendum. Now that Section 30 order was granted in 2012 because the SNP had won a clear outright majority in the 2011 Scottish Parliament election, 69 out of the 129 seats, something that the electoral system was designed to make very difficult. There was a strong democratic mandate for an independence referendum, based on clear manifesto promises made by the SNP that if they won a majority, they would hold one. The UK government under David Cameron accepted that this would be politically and democratically impossible to refuse, such a clear result without appearing anti-democratic. Both governments negotiated and signed the Edinburgh Agreement in 2012, agreeing that the referendum would be legal, fair and decisive. In simple terms, Alex Salmond's Section 30 was granted because the SNP's solo majority gave them a clear right to ask for it, and the UK government thought allowing a controlled referendum was less risky than trying to deny democracy and making independence more popular. So yes, a solo majority was a factor to Westminster agreeing to the Section 30, but it was not the only factor. It is a clear fact that the SNP had a majority and was granted the Section 30. What is not clear is that the UK government stated that the reason was because the SNP had received a solo majority. What David Cameron did say on granting the Section 30 was this: "This marks the beginning of an important chapter in Scotland's story and allows the real debate to begin. It paves the way so that the biggest question of all can be settled: a separate Scotland or a united kingdom. I will be making a very positive argument for our united kingdom. It is now up to the people of Scotland to make that historic decision. The very future of Scotland depends on their verdict. It is that important. This agreement delivers the people's referendum." David Cameron also made his decision on the referendum very clear on the day that he signed the Edinburgh Agreement.
Straightforward question about whether Scotland wants to stay in the United Kingdom or separate itself from the United Kingdom, and that referendum has to be held before the end of 2014. I always wanted to show respect to the people of Scotland. They voted for a party that wanted to have a referendum. I've made that referendum possible and made sure that it's decisive, it is legal and it's fair. What we have is what I always wanted, which is one single question. Not two questions, not Devo Max, not different options. A very simple, single question that has to be put before the end of 2014. So we end the uncertainty, we put beyond doubt Scotland's position either within the United Kingdom, as I hope, or separating itself from the United Kingdom. One single, simple question. That, for me, was always the key. Now we've dealt with the process, now we should get on with the real arguments. And I passionately believe that Scotland will be better off in the United Kingdom, but also, crucially, the United Kingdom will be better off with Scotland. We are better together, we're stronger together, we're safer together, we're better off together. Let the arguments now be put, and I hope that people will vote to keep this United Kingdom together.
In short, the Section 30 was granted. This is a fact. The SNP had a majority. This too is a fact. But I cannot find anywhere that states that it was granted due to the SNP having a majority. Nobody has actually stated that. The second time Section 30 was applied for was by Nicola Sturgeon in 2017. The reason for this request was that the circumstances of the union that Scotland had voted to remain in 2014 had changed dramatically. It was in response to the UK's decision to leave the EU, which Scotland had voted to remain in. The Scottish Government had sought a Section 30 order to hold a second independence referendum based on this. Prime Minister Theresa May refused the Section 30 order, stating that now is not the time for another referendum, emphasising the need to focus on Brexit negotiations. We also have to recognise at this time the SNP did not have a majority in Holyrood. On the 7th of May 2016, the SNP had won 63 seats, and if you count the Greens' 6 MSPs into the total of pro-Scottish MSPs in Holyrood, it was 69, which is the same as the 2011 result, but it wasn't the SNP on their own. That was the only difference. But did Theresa May state that she was refusing this order because the SNP did not have a majority?
When the SNP government say that it's the time to start talking about a second independence referendum, I say that just at this point, all our energies should be focused on our negotiations with the European Union about our future relationship, and to be talking about an independence referendum would, I think, make it more difficult for us to be able to get the right deal for Scotland and the right deal for the UK. And more than that, I think it wouldn't be fair to the people of Scotland, because they'd be being asked to make a crucial decision without the necessary information, without knowing what the future partnership will be or what the alternative of an independent Scotland would look like. So I think just now we should be putting all our energies into ensuring that we get that right deal for the UK and the right deal for Scotland in our negotiations with the European Union. That's my job as Prime Minister. Right now, we should be working together, not pulling apart. We should be working together to get that right deal for Scotland, that right deal for the UK. So I say that's my job as Prime Minister. And so for that reason, I say to the SNP, now is not the time.
So Theresa May refused the Section 30 order from Nicola Sturgeon because now was not the time. Now was not the time. Nicola Sturgeon again requested another Section 30 order in December 2019 from Boris Johnson, based upon the UK general election success of the SNP. Johnson wrote to the former First Minister at the time saying this: "In this situation, the SNP had won 48 out of the 59 UK constituency seats. This is a massive, a huge SNP majority for Scotland." But Boris said no. The reason being that the 2014 referendum was a once-in-a-generation referendum. Again, the Section 30 was refused, but this time not on that the SNP did not have a majority, because clearly they did have a majority in Westminster. I apologise. It's only a majority in Holyrood that counts, not a massive electoral mandate for Westminster with the SNP winning 48 out of the 59 seats. That doesn't count, right? In 2021, the SNP won 64 seats in Holyrood and the Greens won 8. That was an increase in pro-Scottish representation from 69 to 72 MSPs. With this success, the following year the Scottish Government announced plans to hold a second independence referendum on the 19th of October 2023 and sought a Section 30 order to facilitate this. Again, Johnson wrote the former First Minister denying the transfer of power via a Section 30 to hold the referendum. This time, the reason he gave was the following: "I cannot agree that now is the time to return to a question which was clearly answered by the people of Scotland in 2014. He further went on to discuss things like shared responsibilities and the war in Ukraine. The Scottish Government went on to get clarification on whether or not it could call a referendum on its own without the permission of Westminster, and the Supreme Court told them that basically we don't have the right to determine our own future without first getting permission from Westminster. Again, a Section 30 was denied. Again, the SNP did not have a majority of MSPs in Holyrood. And again, we see an official letter expressing their reasons for not granting a Section 30. Again, nowhere to be seen, written or stated that the reason was the SNP did not have a majority. I'm seeing a bit of a pattern here, but let's check just one more Section 30 application. So we now get a new Prime Minister in the form of Rishi Sunak and a new First Minister who is Humza Yousaf. When the First Minister Humza Yousaf requested a Section 30 order from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in April 2023 to hold a second Scottish independence referendum, the UK government declined the request. While no formal statement was issued detailing specific reasons for the refusal, the UK government's position remained consistent with previous rejections of similar requests. A UK government spokesperson emphasised the importance of focusing on shared challenges, stating, "We want to work constructively with the Scottish Government to tackle our shared challenges because that is what families and businesses in Scotland expect." Again, we see a response that conforms to the pattern. The SNP does not have a solo majority. This time, the Prime Minister does not even dignify with an official response and has his minion just brush it off. And most importantly, there is clearly a lack of the UK government stating the reason there is no Section 30 order coming our way is because the SNP does not have a majority. But wait now, what was that murmur in the back row? It's implied that the SNP require a majority. What? Now, we've been through a chunk of research here. Videos, letters, links to articles that you can go and look at yourself. And not one of them holds any factual information pertaining to an implication of the reasons that the SNP cannot obtain a Section 30 is because they don't have a majority. There is genuinely nothing stating this at all. We've been through quite a bit today so far, so I want to show you something else. There was 2 interviews that state the words SNP majority going back to 2020. They're worth a look at, not just for the word majority and SNP, but for the context of its use and the response from the person being interviewed.
If the SNP win a majority here in this Parliament in the next Scottish elections, they will have a mandate for a second independence referendum, will they not?
They will have a mandate for that. What I want to do is to make the case going into that election that actually neither the status quo nor independence is the right way forward. And
so you do accept that if the SNP win that, they have that mandate, therefore the UK government, whoever it is, should give them consent to hold a second independence referendum?
Well, if it's after the 2021 election, then it's likely to be the Boris Johnson Tory government.
You'll say to him, you should grant the powers?
We won't have the powers to block it.
Okay.
But I accept that, this is a question for Scotland. I'm here to discuss and to listen, but also to make the argument that we can't just stick with the status quo or independence.
When I interviewed you on the 28th of January, I asked if the SNP win a majority in the Parliament in the next Scottish elections, will they have a mandate for a second independence referendum? You told me, and I'm quoting you directly, they will have a mandate for that. You've changed your mind. Why?
Well, I don't think that with a pandemic like this, another divisive referendum is what anybody wants.
So there's the proof that the SNP need a majority. A journalist uses the question and the leader of the opposition at the time answers. I guess we will have to base all of our hopes and dreams and the ability for us to express our self-determination on Keir Starmer and that journalist's conversation. But this belief that the UK government has emphatically stated that an SNP majority is necessary is good enough to grant a Section 30 came from somewhere. So if you have any articles, any links to articles or newspapers that definitively state that a requirement of a Section 30 is an SNP majority, please put those links in the comments of this video. I would genuinely like to see them, not because I'm being a smart arse here saying that I'm right and you're wrong, but because part of me wants to be wrong. Okay, I want to know if there's something out there. Until then, my strategy will remain focused on delivering the positive word of liberty to my fellow Scots and how best they can vote for a pro-Scottish government and a pro-Scottish opposition in Holyrood next year. Consider this. While the UK government can legally deny a referendum requested by the Scottish government, doing so in the face of overwhelming public support challenges the democratic legitimacy of such a refusal. This is why we need to get out and vote for a pro-Scottish Parliament that pushes Unionist parties out. This is why we need to demonstrate that we want a pro-Scottish government and a pro-Scottish opposition. This is why we need to vote for any pro-Scottish list-only parties or people. Now, it can be argued that voting for a party with no proven track record of winning seats is a fool's game. But please remember this. The SNP was founded in 1934. It took 11 years for it to win its first seat, which it lost very quickly at the next election. It was over 20 years later that Winnie Ewing won her seat. This was all done in the age of analogue communication, so opinions changed very slowly. We are now in the digital age, and we see that that party with no proven track record of winning seats, just like the SNP did in the analogue days, are now having breakthroughs in polls and an evolution with its direction and its policy. In fact, I would go as far to say that the whole movement is evolving. This particular party, though, understands the additional member system and has agreed at their conference not to field any constituency seats, so it will not split the yes vote in the constituencies. Some may say that they will be splitting the yes vote on the list. However, if you've seen any of the videos I've made on this very subject, you will know that if the SNP are doing well in the constituencies, then your second vote is better placed on a pro-Scottish list-only party or person. I keep saying this, and I will never stop saying this. Our national cause is not political. It is not political. It is the cause of liberty and the right of self-determination. Politics does have a part to play, but it will be the people, us, that will win this. So let's direct our energy in a way that is constructive to deliver a Holyrood Parliament with a majority greater than 86. This is the golden line that we need to cross. And over the next couple of days, I will explain why we need to do this, how we can achieve it, and what happens if we do win this. So please come and join me over the next 3 days to discuss this. And I hope you have an amazing Monday.